What's growing on, gardeners? One of the biggest questions in gardening is, what is the best way to fill a raised garden bed? Many gardeners today are advocating for filling the bottoms of your raised garden beds with logs, branches, wood chips, and other wood products to reduce your costs on buying garden soil. Do not do that until you watch this video. I'm going to share with you why I did not fill any of my new raised garden beds like this, why you probably shouldn't either, and what I think is actually the best way most people should be filling their raised beds.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out my Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom apparel and gear.
If you are a gardening enthusiast, you have probably heard of Hugelkultur, which roughly translates into something like mound culture or gardening on top of mounds. If you are not familiar with this method of gardening became publicized back sometime in the 1960s, but in reality it dates back centuries, maybe even millennia. However, it didn't become widely known to the public until the internet, and largely websites like YouTube started sharing the method, and for lack of a better term, it went viral. Nowadays, Hugelkultur is all the rage, even in backyard gardening. So, what is it? Hügelkultur, or mound culture, is the act of laying down or burying logs, branches, wood chips, and other wood products underneath garden soil and mounding the soil on top of the buried wood. The theory is that when you bury large chunks or amounts of wood, they become long-term moisture storage batteries. Wood is extremely absorbent, and large chunks take a long time to decompose when buried underground, so during rainy periods, the water penetrates deeply into the soil, the buried logs and branches absorb all of that excess water, and the buried wet wood holds onto that moisture for a very long time. Then, when you plant your crops over top those saturated logs, the roots eventually reach down into that wet wood layer and tap into that stored water. So, during times of drought, when the soil itself becomes dry, those crops can survive by feeding off the residual moisture stored in that buried wood. The end result is a drought-resistant garden that needs less irrigation for many years until that wood eventually decomposes for good. It is believed that Hugelkultur originated in European villages, mainly in Northern Europe, where farmers were growing on the slopes of hills and mountainsides. Sloping areas hold onto water very poorly because the water runs right off. So even if you are having a particularly wet year, you may have very dry soil year-round if you're trying to farm or garden on a slope. So farmers would make disordered piles of wood parallel to the slope to effectively catch water, kind of like a dike. Then the water would absorb into the wood, and the wood itself would act as a water storage battery through drier times, effectively conserving the water. That was then, this is now. Call me crazy, but I'm guessing that most of you watching this video right now aren't farming on a steep slope in the German countryside. Most of you are probably gardening in a small backyard with terrain as flat as a pancake, just like I am. And it simply isn't going to make sense for most of us to construct these large, complicated, classical Hugelkultur earth mounds anymore. But that doesn't mean that Hugelkultur doesn't have value. With slight modifications, it is just as valuable to us today as it was to those European mountain farmers centuries ago, since virtually all of us deal with some type of drought where having an underground water storage battery would be a lifesaver for our crops. So how can the concepts of Hugelkultur be applied so they are more relevant to today's gardener? Well, the most popular Hugelkultur evolution I see today is gardeners burying logs, branches, or wood chips underneath their garden soil in their raised garden beds. This modern evolution fixes a lot of problems with the classical Hugelkultur setup, and it offers several distinct advantages. Number one, Hugelkultur mounds are difficult to construct, require a lot of materials, and are vulnerable to erosion. Burying logs in raised beds fixes this because anybody can find some broken branches or old logs somewhere, and tossing them in the bottom of your raised beds, well, that requires no construction skills and doesn't leave your mounds vulnerable to washout from erosion. 2, the buried wood effectively has the same water storage effect where during times of heavy rainfall, the rain will percolate deeply into that wood layer where it will absorb and store that water, and then the plant's roots can tap into that moisture layer during times of drought. And 3, you can initially save quite a bit of money when you're filling the new raised garden beds because instead of having to buy expensive garden soil to fill the entire bed, a portion of the bed can be filled with logs, branches, and wood chips, effectively saving you a bunch of money on garden soil. So, win-win-win, right? This method is easy to do, it'll cost less money to fill all your beds, and you'll need to irrigate less, also saving you time and money. This is especially attractive in places with dry, hot summers. So, Texas, the desert Southwest, and the West Coast, I'm talking to you guys especially. But this can benefit literally everyone because drought can happen anywhere, anytime. So with all of these advantages, placing logs, branches, and wood chips at the bottom of your raised beds seems like a no-brainer, right? Not exactly. This is actually a really bad idea for many raised bed gardeners out there, and here is why. The purpose of the buried wood layer is to act as a moisture-retaining battery, so the deepest roots of the plants that are inside your bed can tap into that moisture layer. It isn't a growing medium. You need a rich, healthy soil layer on top of the wood layer for the plants to grow. So one of the disadvantages of this method is that the wood layer it's effectively a hard stop to your soil. Basically, the soil on top of the wood layer is the only soil your plants have to grow in. So for this reason, the method is only effective for gardeners with deep raised garden beds. You can't place the wood layer at the bottom of a shallow raised garden bed because you'd be displacing the soil the plants need to grow in. So how deep do your raised garden beds need to be for this method to be effective? Well, this is open to some debate. If you make your soil layer too shallow, your plants won't have enough root space to grow and they will do poorly. But if you make your soil layer too deep, your plant's roots won't be able to grow deep enough to access that wood layer, largely defeating its purpose to get that extra moisture in the battery system we made. So we need to find kind of like that sweet spot where there is enough soil that you can grow plants with deep roots like tomatoes, potatoes, and carrots, but shallow enough that the roots can eventually reach the buried moisture. So for that reason, I personally think the ideal soil layer depth you need is something like 12 to 16 inches. This is deep enough that you can pretty much grow anything deep-rooted like indeterminate tomatoes, long carrots and parsnips, and roots and tubers like sweet potatoes and potatoes. But when you plant these crops in spring, by the time the peak summer heat rolls around, the roots should have grown deeply enough that they can access that wood layer to some extent and get that excess moisture. But it doesn't end there. Your beds also need to be deep enough to accommodate enough buried logs and wood chips to make this design actually worthwhile. For this method to be effective, you need something like 6 to 12 inches of buried wood material in that layer. So when you add together the 12 to 16 inches of the soil layer and the 6 to 12 inch wood layer, the minimum depth required for your raised beds are somewhere between 18 and 28 inches just to make this design truly worthwhile. Let's say 18 to 24 inches minimum to be more realistic. So then the question becomes, how many gardeners out there are gardening in a minimum 18 to 24 inch deep raised garden bed? Definitely some, but also definitely not the majority. I'm willing to bet a strong majority of gardeners out there build their raised beds to 12 inches in depth or less. So for you, this method isn't something you should even consider. You need to build especially deep raised garden beds to accommodate this. This harsh reality completely wipes out one of the top reasons why we bury logs in our raised garden beds: reducing soil costs. In order to make the Hugelkultur method viable, we need to build exceptionally deep raised garden beds, which cost more money to build. So any soil savings you get from burying logs will be wiped out by the added costs of the deeper beds themselves, and then some. I just built these 16-inch deep raised garden beds, and I can tell you firsthand understand that it would cost a lot more in lumber costs to add another board's worth of depth to this bed than the soil cost to add a few more inches of soil. So making your beds deeper to save money on soil just doesn't work because the beds themselves cost more. The only way I see this method as being economically viable is if you must have taller raised garden beds because, say, you can't bend over very well to garden and you need them to be, say, waist high or so, and you have no choice but to go with deeper raised beds. Or if you live in such a dry climate that the moisture retention of the buried logs is absolutely necessary. So, say many of you in the desert Southwest or California, where irrigation costs are extremely high, may find this worthwhile because the upfront costs of the deeper beds more than offset the long-term irrigation costs. So if you fit into these categories, then by all means go with the deeper beds and fill the bottoms with some type of wood material. But if you decide to go with this modified Hugelkultur method, please be aware that every single year you are going to have settling in your raised garden beds as that wood layer decomposes. Expect to have a couple inches of settlement happen every year where you will have to add fresh soil. And also keep in mind that what you make that wood layer out of will influence how fast that breakdown occurs. Wood chips, sticks, and small branches will break down the fastest, and the moisture storage battery effect may only last a couple of years before it fades away entirely. Large logs will break down the slowest. So if you need a long-term moisture storage battery system, you need to use large logs because they will take the longest time to break down and hold that moisture best while also settling the least every year. So if you use entirely wood chips and sticks, expect rapid settlement of the soil and don't expect much of an advantage with moisture retention. Wood chips and sticks may save you a few dollars up front when filling your raised beds, but you'll have to add significant amounts of new soil every year until the decomposition is complete. If you follow my channel, you know I just built 5 new raised garden beds. All of these beds are 16 inches deep. For this reason, I did not bury wood chips or logs at the bottoms. I saw no advantage of doing so and only headaches that would arise from it. Instead, I ordered garden soil from a local mulch yard that makes its own soil on site. It is a mixture of topsoil, compost, and poultry manure, which is perfect for raised bed gardening. Ordering it by the truckload was by far the most economical way to do it. I got an entire triaxle load delivered for $240, and it was enough to not only fill all 5 of my raised garden beds, but also add a layer of fresh compost and manure to every single fruit tree, palm tree, and piece of landscaping around my entire front and backyard. So for that money, I not only filled all 5 of my new beds, but I fertilized virtually every single perennial I have growing on. For the vast majority of gardeners, this is what I think is the best way to fill your raised garden beds. You'll get a tremendously better price this way than buying bag mix from a big box store. Settlement of the soil will be minimal because there isn't a buried wood layer that will decay and sink over time, and there is still enough organic matter in the soil mix that I expect more than adequate moisture retention at a generous depth of 16 inches. This is truly the best way for most of us to minimize costs because we don't have to spend the extra money on extra deep raised garden beds, and we still get bulk pricing on the garden soil itself delivered to your door. If you want to know exactly how I built the new raised garden beds in my garden, I will place a link both above and down in the video description that is a full tutorial on how to do so. I think these are the best raised garden beds I have ever used or even seen. But whatever you decide, please, no matter what, do not ever plant a fruit tree or any other kind of tree on a Hugelkultur mound. That's because Hugelkultur mounds are structurally unstable. You can only grow shallow-rooted things in those Hugelkultur mounds because the wood can shift if there is too much weight placed on top of it, and it prevents your trees from rooting and anchoring deeply into the soil. So if you were to plant trees on an actual Hugelkultur mound, it's only a matter of time until a windstorm comes and uproots them and blows them over. So please keep that in mind. And that right there are my thoughts on hugelkultur, burying wood in raised beds, and what I truly believe is the best way for most people to fill a raised garden bed with soil cheaply and easily. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring that notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I use in real life in my garden, I will place links to all of them down in the video description in my Amazon storefront link. So expand the video description, click on the Amazon storefront link, and you'll see everything I use in real life. And while you're down there, please check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video.
Now that it's finally cooled off for the day, Dale and I are outside. We're playing with Lammy. Give me that thing. Give me that lamb. Give me that lamb. Dale is absolutely massacring his lamb. Look at the fluff. He has just utterly destroyed this thing. There's bits of Lammy everywhere. Oh, Dale, you are leaving me the biggest mess to clean up, and it's trash night. Oh my goodness, look at this. Oh, we have to get him a doctor. Oh, is there a hospital open this time of night? Dale, give me Lammy. Oh, we have to save him before there's nothing left. Give me that lamb. Give me Lammy. I'm going to save him. I'm going to save Mr. Lamb. Okay, you can have him back. Ready? Whoa, ooh, that sounded like it hurt, buddy. You missed. Was your jaw okay? Oh, no, he's eating the butt out of it. Oh, no. Oh, poor lamb. He didn't deserve that. Hey, Dale, ready? Try again. Nice catch, buddy. All right, that's enough for the night. I'm starting to get bitten by gnats already.